Welcome to the Real T. I'm your host, Tammy Murphy, broker owner of RH2L, bringing Miami Valley real homes to love.
And I'm Ellie Sollenberger to give my perspective as a home buyer.
We're going to give you the key to Miami Valley real estate.
Okay, so we're going to do some rapid fire questions. Get to know your hosts.
The process, whatever, however you want to say it, right?
Right. So, Tammy, what is the most number of houses you've shown someone before they bought?
Honestly, I would say that I probably have lost count in a couple of situations, but I know that very specific buyers looking in market times where it wasn't necessarily ideal for that situation, easily 50 to 100 homes. And that's not in 1 month, thankfully, but a serious buyer who had a time urgency, and we would see no less than 10 homes a day when we would go out. We easily saw 75 homes in 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
So it's just that I work based off of what are the demands and the needs of the client and what the market is allowing for us. So when we used to be able to see set schedules of showings and go see 10 houses at a time, that's great. Now we're lucky if we set a schedule for tomorrow that I actually get to take that tour because the home goes under contract.
Right.
And I'm making that appointment today. So depending on the market, you may do it all at once or it may be expanded. Like my VA buyer, we took 4 years and we definitely saw a lot of houses. So.
Mm-hmm. So do you find that the people that see more houses don't really know what area they're going to want to buy in?
I would say that it's more specific needs that they have, because generally somebody who's not sure what community or area they want may be driven by budget. So that's going to be the really driving force there. Somebody who says, I need 4 bedrooms, a split floor plan, and I need master suite, the ensuite. I need to make sure that there's a basement, and they have very specific needs. While it's harder to find, it's very clear cut. When it comes up, we're going.
Right.
We're off and running.
Yeah. Okay. What is the most number of contracts on a listing you've had to get it closed?
Ooh, so I had a house, and I'm going to say that it wasn't the fault of the house or the seller or any specific buyer, but heart-wrenching situations that came about. We had this great little house that was newly renovated and all of these things, picture perfect. We went under contract 13 times, 13 different buyers, different scenarios of everything in the world that could happen happened.
So what were some of them?
So the first buyer who was under contract bought a truck 2 days before closing.
No, you don't buy any large purchases right before closing or when you go under contract. That is like the number one.
Thank you.
Rule.
And apparently that realtor did not tell their client that, and we got the call. And yes, they do check that, and you are not able to close on this property. So that's the first fail that happened with this house, which wasn't the house, wasn't the seller, right?
So when a buyer does that, do they lose their earnest money?
Potentially. Potentially. That's a discussion and negotiation between the seller and the buyer.
True.
You want to say, was it really the fault of the buyer? Well, yeah, because you should have known not to buy this. The sad reality is, dude, I guess you're sleeping in your truck for a little bit, or
right, I have an expensive, nice truck.
moving in with the family. But so then we went back up on the market, and it was just from there. I've heard a statistic, and I never really put it together to realize. It's like 80% of the transactions that go under contract on the first offer, 80% of them fail. The first offer is generally not the one that actually closes. I think that is an incredible statistic that I'm going to now start paying attention to, because I've had clients who were the first buyer to make the offer and we don't get it and was like, what the heck? And I've had those offers come in on sellers, and that first one, we think it's the greatest, and it doesn't go through. And it's like, I'm going to start counting now to see if that actually is legit.
Yeah.
But So
what were some of the other reasons? 13, there's a lot.
Yeah, there was a timing issue on one, and then the well pump went out, which it was a new well pump, so this was a rural property. And the seller says, look, I'll fix it, not a problem. Like, I'd already fixed it once, I'll fix it again, get the company back out. We have a warranty. And the buyer was under a time crunch, so they moved on. So we fix it, we go back up, I mean, it's just, it's not like when you go into the house and you find out that there's mold in the basement and the furnace is like 60 years old and the roof won't pass, and
Right.
none of that was the situation. And those are things that you'd like to say, and you could caution the buyer that maybe this isn't the condition that you want, and so you're letting them know that unless you're wanting to come in here and do all of this, you've got some major things that's going to come up.
Yeah.
But yeah, nothing like that. So it was just one thing after another. And it's like,
So I firmly believe that you're supposed to be in the house that you're supposed to be in. So that one just took 13 people to actually get there.
and and to be honest, the seller was really great. They were proactive in this because they could have gotten frustrated. They could have said, forget it, I'm not going to sell it. Any of the buyers, obviously, that we were dealing with, everybody was dealing in good faith. And there wasn't anybody that was sabotaging this or making this happen. I worked with 13 different realtors in this case
Right.
to try to get this thing to happen. And from my perspective, I could have been just as frustrated and said, this is not worth my time and effort. I mean, I keep going out here every time I have to change what's happening and all the phone calls that are involved because you're trying to do your due diligence, right?
Yeah.
And answer what you're able to answer and do all of this. But we all stuck it out.
And then I feel like people seeing it go up 13 times are like, what's wrong with that?
Well, so in some of those, the public aren't necessarily seeing that it's shifting that time.
Oh, okay.
So because you get smart in this business when you do it for as long as I have, and you're like, well, we're going to take the first offer, maybe we take a backup. And if we've got multiples coming in, we're going to make sure that we keep them in the line. So that did help. But that is also why a lot of that was going through the process there. When there is a break and you've gone off as under contract in the system and then you're back on, there is a stigma that can be associated with that. People are like, well, what happened? Why did that fail? Oh, wait, it's been long enough. Is it must have failed the inspection? So,
Yeah.
what we're obligated and able to tell is dictated by client consent. But obviously, if a buyer backs out because they had a job change that they weren't expecting, so they knew that they weren't going to be able to close, that's not on any fault of them. Life happens for us all.
Right.
So then you just kind of work through the process and go on to the next one.
But I feel like having a relationship with your realtor is super important. Have you ever had to fire a client?
I've been lucky that I haven't had to fire a client. I'm going to take that back. I haven't fired them in the way that word connotates, right? I have had conversation recently with a client and just said, the needs that you have, I absolutely understand. And I want you to be able to get exactly what it is that you feel you need and want, and to be able to use this specific program. So they had a unique situation. They have money that's going to be given to them towards their purchase if they do this, this, and this. Okay, so that's great. However, the market that we are in isn't one where sellers are reducing the price and doing repairs before you take ownership. Mm-hmm. So if this loan program requires this house to be 100%, finding a perfect house in the price range that you are in is difficult.
Yeah.
And the price point that they were in is more of an investor getting into a distress, going in and making improvements. Well, you can't ask the seller to make improvements if you're asking that to your specific needs, but there's no guarantee that you're still going to close it, because things happen, right?
Right. And then if they make the improvements, the price would go up.
And then the price would go up. And they're not going to allow you to go in and make those improvements, nor should you put your money in because you don't own the property. So you could go in and you could do it. They might allow you to do it, but then they don't have to sell it to you. And now you're out that money and there's nothing you could do. Right. And he'd had a couple of those bad experiences in other transactions with a different realtor. So I took them and was trying to work the process, and it just really came down to we have to have a heart-to-heart conversation because I want to do what's best for you, but the market isn't there. Right. It's similar to investors. We don't have a lot of investors that are doing things because of the price point they want to come in at. Just not a lot of property inventory.
Right. That's where you see like the people on TikTok will do the videos where it shows each side, and the people want a $350,000 house, but they're only approved for a $250,000 house. I feel like you have to be comfortable with your realtor, or as the realtor with your client, to say, what are we doing?
Yeah. And again, because ultimately you want the best for them as the client. And I can make things happen. I mean, I will do anything and everything that I can to find the house, make the deal, do whatever, negotiation. But
I can attest to that.
But although some have said I have been their Wonder Woman in the deal, I can't be the miracle worker. And it's just a reality, unfortunately, of knowing where we were in the market that I wasn't able to do it. So, yes, we parted ways. Hopefully, if the situation would ever change, and I'm still, when I go through properties, I still think about, could this be a possibility for that person?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't on negative terms, so that's the good news. That's why I don't think the word fired actually works.
Yeah, that's good. So, have you ever been fired by a client?
I have not, fortunately, that I know about. I mean, here's the reality. Sometimes people don't call you back.
Right.
Or text, or even show up to the appointment that you set.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty great at following up and making sure I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and where I'm supposed to be. But if somebody doesn't do their part, I don't know. Did something happen that I don't know about? Did they just go off on a different path? Did they hire a different realtor? So not officially ever have I been fired, but I've definitely been ghosted by people and, led down a path that they really weren't able to follow through on.
So I watch, the realtor shows on Netflix, and they will get, as the seller's agent, a listing, and it'll expire because they didn't sell this $25 million house.
Right.
Would you consider that being fired by a client if they move on to another realtor?
No, because you have a contractual agreement, and this is the time frame that we're going to work in. And if it doesn't work out, and honestly, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out.
Right.
It just didn't. So that's an expired contract. There's no continued representation or anything like that. But just like I do a listing agreement with my sellers, I do a buyer's agreement with the buyers. And that gives us that timeline that we know that we're working in. And that's to meet the needs. So if it passes and life changes, then life changes and you move on.
Yeah. So what is the scariest situation doing your job that you've ever had?
The scariest situation I was in, I was a listing agent on a commercial property in a blighted area. And I was having to do a property check on it, because of course this is a client who's out of the area and it's a blighted area. So you have to do these routine checks on the property condition to make sure everything is good.
Yeah.
I had an inkling that I was going into a situation that would be uncomfortable, potentially dangerous. And so I took precautions, as I would, obviously. And part of that precautions was I had my kids with me.
Yeah.
Now,
adult kids.
They weren't adult. This has been a few years.
Oh, okay.
They were not adult kids at that time. But I had two of my sons were with me. More of where we were doing other things, and this is just my drive-by. I need to check on this property. And oh, by the way, I'm going to want you to, one, stand at the car, and one, come in with me. That way we have kind of viewpoints from the access. And yeah, it was, you do this really bam, 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 bam on the door just to make sure if there's anybody, anything, right? You know there's somebody coming in. Unlock this door. Now, typically, I'm in heels, a dress, and have things in my hands. So I was in heels. I was not in a dress, and I did not have anything in my hand except for the keys, and a sidearm, obviously, because I was going into a really dangerous situation.
Yeah.
Which, just disclosure, I have a CCW, so don't freak out, people.
I think in Ohio you can just have one now.
Now, yeah. But I'm in real estate. I'm a female, and I meet strangers in vacant houses, and at all times I'm on call. So yes, I am coming prepared for my protection, and in this case, that was fully what was going on. So my middle son was with me, who was probably 11 or 11 at that time. But he was pretty, he was up to my shoulder height anyway, so he was a good distance with me. Yeah. And he's like, whatever, what do we need to do? And I'm like, so when we had passed by the front, because I did a circumference around, right, the front window had been busted. So I'm on high alert already, knowing that this is the situation. So one is standing at the car, the other is walking beside me. We're going in. Now he's going to go up to the front window so that he can block it off and put something up there to be a barrier so that there's no open access. Mm-hmm. As he passes about, we'll call it midway of this property, he passes and I'm walking behind him and he continues on and I stop and I'm just previewing, looking around. And there is this shadow that I know, no joke, tell you, rises up from a chair that was there. And I'm so thankful that it happened the way that it did, because I was focused on him going to there. So when I saw this movement out of my peripheral, I look and it's literally the old James Bond movie where they are in the graveyard and they've got the stuff rising up from, it flashed in my mind. And I am like, what is happening right now? And this guy rises up. He has on a sweatshirt and he's got the hoodie pulled over and everything. It's dark. It's not lit up. It's really not where I needed to be at that moment.
Right.
But he rose up and he put his hands up like this, and he is like, I'm not here to do any harm. I'm not here to do any harm. And I am like, you need to go out right now.
Yeah.
And at that moment, my son at the front is paying attention and he's like, what the heck is going on? He didn't make a sudden move. This guy did not make a sudden move. He's like, and I am like, if you walk out, we will not have a problem, but this is not going to happen this way. And he walked out, and as he's walking out, I'm going along with him. My other son is here. He's got this window, and he's starting now to walk faster behind me. And now I'm going this way because I'm like, don't go to the car, because I'm protecting not only the property, but my kids at this point.
Yeah,
like Mother Bear was on high alert. And so my youngest had actually come to the back door, not realizing. He was like, what's taking so long? What are you doing? So he comes to the door as this guy is going out, and the guy just kept on walking. And my sons, their eyes were so big around, and they were like, what the crap just happened? And I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to secure this building and get out of here. Like, it didn't hit me until I was like 3 blocks away. And I was literally shaking.
Yeah.
That could have been such a bad situation, regardless. I'm just so thankful that I didn't go by myself, but I'm so thankful that the person, they had honestly just sought refuge in the property. Mm-hmm. They hadn't done any damage. I don't know that he's the one that had broken the window or if he just came in as the window was broken, but he hadn't done anything in there, and he was gracious enough to go out and not cause a scene.
Yeah.
But that is absolutely my scariest moment in real estate.
Wow. No, That's crazy.
Yeah.
Have you ever dealt with haunted properties?
Not that I say were haunted per se. I do believe that there are some people who are tuned into that,
Yeah.
and I respect it. I'm the person who's going to respect it all, because just like in this scenario, my head is flashing to zombie scenes and all of that stuff.
Right.
If somebody says they feel a presence in the home, I'm going to believe you, and that is your call to make. But yeah, I have had people who've gone into homes who felt the presence of another. And then later we found out that there was somebody who passed away of natural causes. So does that mean it's haunted or whatever? Hard to say, but
Yeah. Have you ever dealt with like a home where there was a murder in there?
not knowingly.
Can you explain?
So oddly enough, I was managing a property for someone. As a multifamily, so apartment building, and I did not. I'm from this area,
Yeah.
so I know a lot of stuff that's happened, whatever. But you don't know everything, right?
Right,
You don't
yeah.
certainly remember it from whatever. And we'd been managing that for a while, and somebody come back, and there was a tenant in there now, and they're like, "Did you know this was where that murder took place?" And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
Sure enough, when we took on the property, the unit had an elderly woman and her daughter living there. So no indication of anything. You know, it wasn't updated. When they moved out, we went in and did some renovations to update the property. No indication of any of this. And sure enough, it was a big time situation that took place, and the husband murdered the wife in the unit and was a disaster.
Wow.
I'm glad I didn't know it.
Yeah. So you see a lot of these like famous houses where, you know, a famous murder took place. And a lot of them like, so since O.J. Simpson died, I've kind of done a deep dive into that entire thing because I was 5 when the trial happened. And his house on Rockingham was demolished and the address was changed. And then where the actual murders of Nicole took place, they changed that address and then kind of changed the facade. So, you know, people that go look at famous murder sites like me when I'm on vacation would be discouraged from going and looking at that.
Right. And it is a stigmatization that happens with a property if something like that happens. You know, another thing of that, I was showing a property to a client, and while we were there, the client did a Google search of this property address and found out it wasn't the scene of a murder, but it was the scene of serious crime activity that took place.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, obviously, is the concern is, does somebody come back thinking those people are still there?
Right.
Are you in danger? So that I absolutely understand from a buyer's perspective why that would be a concern. But there may be so many hands in the mix and changes of ownership that somebody doesn't know it when they've bought it, therefore they can't pass along that information. And there's not really a registry per se of a lot of this that you would know.
Yeah.
It
and I
makes
know
it difficult.
at the time of this recording, the Chris Watts home in Colorado is for sale again. And people are, you know, speculating, does that improve the price of the home because this was such an infamous home, or does it hurt it?
Well, so you've got some people that would be really high alert on that and say that's a benefit. You know, it's a famous place, and maybe some monetization comes from that. Who knows?
Yeah.
With that apartment, I was away on vacation, and I'd gotten a phone call from the tenant was there, and they're like, "Did you know there's a film crew here?" I'm like, "What? What do you mean there's a film crew?" Some film crew showed up from the UK wanting to film about this murder that they had gotten some information on. And I'm like, I don't even know how they found
for like
this
a
out.
documentary?
to do a documentary on it. And of course, the tenants that are there now, we don't want that happening. The owner doesn't want that information, so we didn't give authority for that to happen. But information is out there. If people are looking for it, they can find it usually.
Wow, that's really interesting. So if you have to say what your like typical work day is like for people that are wanting to get into real estate, and I know you're an old pro.
Old?
No, not old that way, but you've been in this business quite a long time. So, younger realtors or people that are wanting to start in the real estate business could look up to you and say, how do you do this? You've done it all.
Yeah.
How would you describe that?
Basically I do feel like I've done a little bit of it all, but the industry has changed and it's continuing to change, and the one thing that I know is that I'm an entrepreneur at heart, so this really fits in. My commercial art background gives me a heads up on being able to do the marketing and being open to technology. Those were all things that I think I bring to the table and why this was a great fit, because this is not a job where you just do one thing. Typically. Now, could you be a buyer's agent and only work with buyers? Yes. Could you be a listing agent and only work with sellers? Yes. But typically, you do a little bit of everything, and you got to be able to do paperwork. You got to be organized. You got to be able to do finances, and you've got to be able to budget your own money, because you may not get paid every week, certainly not, but maybe you don't get even paid every month. So you have to be able to budget. And I also respected the fact that this is a business. So I addressed it from the beginning with an LLC, with the structure, and knowing that this is how I want to be able to operate. I think those were all reasons for success, but it's also every one of those has duties that go along with it that every day I'm doing, or every week I'm having to address, handle, facilitate, and it can be overwhelming. So it's not for the faint of heart. It's not about the glitz and the glory. I know, selling Sunset and all of that stuff make it look so easy. We don't see them doing any paperwork, do we? But it is a matter of, if you have a passion for it, if you enjoy the service part of what you're doing and helping people, if you like real estate and you really can get energized by that, then I definitely think it is an avenue to come into. But you have to be open and willing to. And I'm an advocate for the profession. So I don't want people who just want to come in for the easy money and, get in and get out, and then they move on to the next thing. I'm all about being the person who's the advocate for the community, talking to our clients and representing them and doing all of that. And that adds to what I do. But that means I do committee work with the board, at the local level, at the state level. I've worked with the national level in getting education so that I could do programs for companies and people. I'm never bored. There's always something that I can do. And just like even with this podcast, this kind of came out as an opportunity to be able to share with people a different perspective, other ideas. It's not just cut and dry, and every day it's always something.
Yeah. So why did you decide to become your own brokerage instead of joining one of the national ones?
Well, I thought that it was really important, after being in the business for a while. I was in the business for about 13 years before I decided to be my own brokerage.
Who were you with before?
I was with, so officially I started in Arizona with a small brokerage, a boutique brokerage out there, and that was my basis for getting started. And that was also the precursor to say, you could do this, right? When I came back to Ohio, I was with Keller Williams for a short time. I was with Exit Realty for a number of years, and I was with Prudential. And what ended up happening was changes within each of those brokerages that just kind of pushed me a little further to the realization that I'm pretty structured when it comes to organization, standards, policies, and that. And I like to know that there's that structure. And it was a little uncomfortable being in a situation where that wasn't there, because as a broker, the responsibility falls to me. So when I was with brokerages, I was just a realtor, not just a realtor, but I wasn't a broker.
Yeah.
So I was a real estate agent who is a realtor through NAR. But that meant that the broker was taking that responsibility and liability, the excess that goes with that, right? But in some situations, I didn't have anybody that I could actually go to when I had a situation that came up. And I think that's a very, very important piece to this industry, is if there is leadership roles and hierarchy, then that should be followed and that should mean something, and there should be accountability.
Yeah.
So when you don't feel like as an agent that you have a broker that you can talk to when you have this problem and you need to be able to resolve it for your client, you've got a problem. And when you feel like, the brokerage maybe doesn't offer you the benefit because they're getting a portion of your earnings, right? The brokerage gets paid and the agents get paid from that. Everybody's getting a share at that point. So if you're giving up money for the brokerage, but you're not getting a benefit that you say you have, well, then that's also probably time to have a conversation. In my case, it was very clear cut. When I had left from Exit Realty to go to Prudential, I sat down and I said, the only reason why I'm having this conversation is because I wasn't happy where I was at. And the only reason why I would look to come here is that I'm going to get XYZ.
Yeah.
And that if this fits, then great. But as soon as, and in my case, I had 6 broker changes within the company. So people were moving in their position, which meant it was a different person I was reporting to. It's kind of not me making the change, but they kept making changes. I didn't like that.
Yeah.
Because every time that happened, I had to change my marketing. I had to reflect the new information in order. So it cost me money every time they made a change.
Yeah,
Didn't like it. So that was straight up my conversation with the Prudential at that time. And they're like, no, we understand, absolutely. And literally, the first year that I was there with them, they made the change. They announced the change that they were changing to Berkshire Hathaway. And I'm like, great, glad for you, but I gave you the heads up. And I said, if you make a broker change, and the name change is a broker change because everything has to be changed, that I would go on my own. And so that's when RH2L was created and established, and I went for my broker's license and haven't looked back. So it's over 10 years now that I've been a brokerage.
That's awesome. How did you come up with the name?
So I've done real estate myself. Remember, I started as a business, an LLC, so I was Real Homes to Love, and that's how I sold property represented clients under me. That's how I was paid, as Real Homes to Love, as a person with an LLC. And so what I wanted to be able to do when I became the brokerage was not have to reinvent the wheel. How do I make that work? And so that parlayed into using the acronym RH2L.
Oh, how did you come up with Real Homes to Love originally?
That was sitting in a license class here in Ohio, and the speaker that was giving the course was just, the whole conversation was talking about email addresses. And so email addresses are like your number one way to be able to market to people. They see it all the time. So choose an email address that makes sense. And I took that to mean, why would I just limit it to email address? That's my business, that's everything, so I tie into it. And I wanted it to relate to real estate. So Real Homes to Love, so Tammy at Real Homes to Love is my email address. And even when I was with any of the other brokerages, because it's not a conflict, it's my email, I use that as my email address.
Okay.
So here's your tip. If you're in real estate or thinking about coming into real estate, most people are going to come in and they're going to take on, okay, I'm Tammy at XYZ Real Estate. And that's the email that they take. Well, guess what happens when you're no longer at XYZ Real Estate? You no longer have that email or access to it.
Right.
And now anybody that you've worked with prior contacting you there is going to get junk or contacted by somebody else. And so that's a negative. Own your email address as an agent so that you don't have to worry about when or if you make a change, that you know your clients are going to be able to contact you. And that was a point that was made early on, and it stuck with me forever on everything.
That's a good idea.
Awesome.
Sweet.
So next time you're talking to somebody, ask them what their email address is and say, well, anybody can create a Gmail address. So does that really mean you're in real estate? Just because it says real estate at Gmail? Don't think so.
Right.
Just a heads up.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us today on the Realty Podcast. If you enjoyed the knowledge and entertainment today, please subscribe and share with your friends. We will be embarking on a journey that bridges the gap between realtors and clients, uncovering the heart and tea of real estate.